Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, the Storytellers. This series is brought to you by Cap Logistics. Cap Logistics are experts in offering you customized transportation solutions for every need, so please visit caplogistics.com today. All right, today's topic is one near and dear to my heart with some history I've had in starting my career in the parcel business way back in the day. And our guest today is Mr. Jerry Hempstead, also known as Mr. Parcel. And we're going to talk about parcel pricing trends for 2019. So, Jerry, thanks so much for joining us out in sunny Florida.
Thank you for inviting me, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Awesome. Before we jump into our topic, we like to learn a little bit about our guest. Jerry, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, after I finished my college studies, I had no marketable skills whatsoever and needed a job. And by the grace of God, somebody handed me a napkin with a name and a phone number on it and said, call this guy. And in 1973, so long before you were born, I picked up the phone and I called the district manager of a company called Airborne at Kennedy Airport. And I told him that I had just finished my studies and I needed a job, and he said, come in and see me. I went in and talked to him for about an hour or so. He sent me to a couple of other people in the company, and later on that week, they made me an offer. And I thought I would be there for about a year, and I spent 30 years with Airborne Express until they were purchased by a company called DHL. Yep. So Airborne is gone from the landscape. DHL is very much alive and well and the largest transportation and logistics company in the world now. And I worked for DHL. At the time Airborne was sold, I said I was only going to stay until I was 55. I turned 55, and they asked me to stay a while longer. But in 2006, I went down to Human Resources and said, give me my clock, because the last thing a retired person needs is a clock. And in fact, they give you a clock when you retire. You don't need one anymore. And about 5 minutes after I retired, my phone rang, and one of my clients said, you can't retire. We need to be able to still consult with you and talk to you. Would you be interested in starting a consulting business? So Hempstead Consulting was formed, and a couple of months later, I met the chairman of FedEx China. He invited me to come over and look at a project in China, and I agreed to go for a week, and I spent almost all of 2007 working in the logistics field in China. Okay. So I've got a very varied field. Most of my time now is spent consulting with e-commerce companies because, as you can imagine, it has generated a lot of parcels. I'll bet within the last month, a parcel carrier has come to your front door with one or more parcels.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
That is very true. I think the transportation, it's like dog years, right? It's a little bit longer than you think. So anyway, thank you for the summary, and we're going to jump right into our topic because you are truly the parcel expert, and this one is going to focus not only on pricing, but we'll get into some other themes. But let's just jump into it, and let's talk about some pricing trends for 2019. Maybe you could start with 2 or 3 trends that you see in the industry that'll impact the consumer and the shipper in 2019.
So the tradition in the parcel industry has been, for the longest time, that every year at the beginning of the year, the parcel carriers would announce a general rate increase. We call it a GRI, general rate increase. And that would go into effect either late December in the case of UPS or the first of the year for most of the other parcel carriers. And generally speaking, for the last decade, that general rate increase has gone up 4.9%, generally speaking. And it's an average increase that they announce. Now, there's a problem with this phrase average because the increases that the carriers take are not linear. So the 1 pound rate may go up 8% because there's a lot more 1 pound shipments than there are 2 pound shipments. And the 70 pound rate may not go up at all, but they announce a general average rate increase of 4.9%. There was one notable exception this year to that rule, and DHL, who's mostly an international carrier here in the United States for parcels, announced a 5.9%. So you say, well, why would they do that? Why would they separate themselves from the pack? Well, For some time prior to that, a couple of years prior to that, their base pricing was significantly less expensive than the base pricing of FedEx and UPS. And so they needed to catch up. And so even though they announced 5.9% versus 4.9%, their base rates are still slightly lower than those offered by the other two major carriers. The other notable exception this year, and I'm sure that your listeners have seen this in the newspapers, is the United States Postal Service. The United States Postal Service carries a lot of packages.
Yes.
They also carry packages for UPS. They carry packages for FedEx. They carry packages for DHL e-commerce, a company called Logistics, which is owned by Pitney Bowes. So a lot of small packages today, at least the last mile, are transported by the United States Postal Service.
Right.
The Postal Service has limitations as to what they can and can't do with their pricing, but several years ago, Congress allowed them to separate out the parcel business into what was called competitive pricing, and it allows them a lot more latitude than just the cost of living, which first-class mail normally generally is.
Right.
And so that being said, because they had no limit as to what they could do, the parcel pricing went up significantly this year. In particular, that class of mail that is used by UPS, SurePost, FedEx SmartPost, DHL e-commerce, Amazon, all of these companies took a fairly major hit in the last mile costs because the Postal Service went up 10 or more % in that particular category of mail. And that'll be passed on to us in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
In the form of higher prices.
So UPS, or excuse me, USPS, the Postal Service, raised their rates for the hybrid services that they do final mile for all carriers. That's what you're saying?
It'll hit everybody, sure. The base pricing hit everybody. Amazon, UPS, FedEx, DHL, Pitney Bowes,
gotcha.
Stamps.com.
Yeah, you got it. So is that the first time that the Post Office has done that to give the increases, or is this
No,
something?
The Postal Service has a process by which it can raise prices, so it's a fairly regulated process by which it goes through this gyration, and there's been rate increases before, but this was a very targeted, very surgical price increase, and it's where the Postal Service is growing their business right now.
Sure.
It's in the last mile, and the carriers have no other place to go other than, and we see Amazon doing this, putting on their own trucks.
Yep, exactly.
So Amazon we'll talk Amazon later, but
yeah.
they recently purchased 20,000 vehicles.
Yeah, I saw that. Perfect. So what other type of trends are you seeing in the pricing industry for 2019?
So what we saw emerge a little over a year ago was a trend by the carriers, mostly FedEx and UPS. We also saw it with the Postal Service, to have more than one rate increase a year. And so they started inserting things where their costs were not covering, or their experience cost with a package weren't covering the revenue that they were bringing in. They were changing fees. So, for example, there's a big influx of business during the holiday season. So let's add a holiday surcharge. If you're going to ship to a residence during the holidays, we're going to charge you extra for that.
Sure.
So that we saw the introduction of that mid-year. Things that require additional handling. So if a shipper tenders a package in a crate, a wooden box, in a can, in a pail, things that don't move well on the conveyor system that could potentially harm or damage other packages on the conveyor system in the sort center.
Right.
They have to be manually removed. Let's charge a fee for that. So then they put in 3 types of additional fees: one for packaging, one for weight. So if a piece is over 70 pounds, and one for its dimensions. So if its dimensions don't look pretty to their sort center, and they have to manually handle it, they're going to handle a surcharge. And then oversized pieces.
Okay.
And so in this day and age, because of the advent of the internet, where you can buy practically everything over the internet and have it at your front door within 2 days, just about everything, including mattresses, are showing up in the courier companies' sort systems.
Right.
And it gums it up. So we've seen not only the introduction of additional surcharges, we've seen them add a holiday surcharge to the additional surcharges. because the number of these unusual transactions increases exponentially during the holiday season.
Sure.
And gums up the system, gums up the sort. And so the carriers are being emboldened. They really don't want business, emboldened by ordinary increase in price for some of these additional surcharges.
Right. Yeah. I can definitely see that. I usually buy a mattress every summer or every winter, so there you go. But you're right. It is absolutely crazy. You can purchase anything online, and there's some amazing sizes and shapes and things that you wonder how the heck that got through the system to my front door. So I can certainly see why that is relevant. So beyond the service rate increases, let's switch over to fuel surcharges. That's a whole nother dynamic as well. And before, that was usually tied to an industry standard or a government kind of level. Talk to us a little bit about fuel surcharges for 2019 and how those are calculated and implemented.
So interestingly, there is no standard. So the fuel surcharge charged by FedEx is not the same as that charged by UPS, is not the same as that charged by DHL. They all have independent, separate, different fuel surcharges. The trend we have seen over the last 8 or 9 months is that carriers get used to the revenue that's coming in as a result of fuel charges. They get really accustomed to it,
right?
And they hate it. They hate it when fuel goes down, because then, you know, if there's a trigger number that makes the fuel surcharge go up or down, when fuel goes down in price, the fuel surcharge charge to the customer goes down. And so all of the carriers, except for the Postal Service, who doesn't have a fuel surcharge, announced changes in the trigger number during the course of the year, and in some cases took extraordinary increases. DHL, for example, took a huge increase in the fuel surcharge it charged, and I think they introduced that around September.
Okay.
In mid-year, you know, and they did it without any notice to their customers. They put out a press release and put it on their webpage, and that's it. And there's little or nothing that shippers can do about that. And so they've also introduced different fuel surcharges. If a shipment's moving ground, there's one fuel surcharge. If it's moving air, there's a different fuel surcharge. If it's an export, it's a different fuel surcharge. If it's an import, it's again a different fuel surcharge. So you really got to be an Einsteinian physicist to figure out all of the different iterations of what's my fuel surcharge going to be based on the configuration of the package and what carrier you're using.
Yeah.
The other thing that was introduced, and we just talked about accessorial charges like oversized fees, residential fees, delivery area surcharges, all these other fees that the carriers have introduced. The fuel surcharge now applies to the fees as well.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just the base transportation rate. So if you're paying an extended delivery area surcharge and a residential fee going to a residence, the fuel surcharge is going to apply to the base rate less your discount, plus the fuel surcharge, plus the residential fee, plus the delivery area surcharge, and it can compound very quickly.
Yeah. What's the feedback been to have a customer say, why am I paying X percent fuel surcharge on a residential fee? Aren't I already paying that in the transportation charge? What's the general feedback that you're getting, that the customers are seeing?
Because these other services, these ancillary services, like it's going to a residence rather than a business. So there's less delivery density to that particular address, and therefore they have greater cost, and you got to cover the fuel for the driver to drive to the residence. They've got lots of excuses as to why they can do it. The reality is they do it because they can.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, that seems just the complexity. You know, when you and I first met years ago, it was a rate, ground, next day, second day air, and that was it. The complexities are amazing. Can it be more complex? I mean, it's really difficult.
It has become more complex.
Yeah.
Because now you can have very early morning delivery with FedEx and UPS.
Right.
Then you have morning delivery next day with them. Then they have afternoon delivery, if you want to pick that. They have second day morning. They have second day. They have third day, which is a hybrid air and ground product. Then they have their ground product. And then they have fast and faster international services. express and regular international services. So it's really complex. And of course, each of those types of services is the pricing is broken down by the distance a package travels as well as its weight. So there's many pieces in the puzzle here that are going on. The weight, the distance, the level of service you want, whether it's domestic, international, and so on. So it can be really difficult for some of your listeners who have high volumes of transactions.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it can definitely be pretty complicated. So let's just dovetail on that. Like, what would be some strategies? I want to talk about some trends here in a few minutes, but or some disruptors, if you will. But what are some strategies that high volume shippers can use to try to navigate this crazy landscape that you just described?
Well, the first thing is you really need to know when a package has to be delivered. Mm-hmm. So I see in most cases, packages are delivered much faster than they need to be there. And you know who's pushing a lot of that? Is Amazon.
Right.
You know, they're offering next day delivery or second day delivery for free if you're a Prime member. Do you really need that stuff on this? My daughter gets toilet paper, paper towels, and baby diapers delivered to her house in 2 days because she's for free because she's an Amazon Prime member. Sure. She doesn't need a month's worth of toilet paper all in one day, right?
But she can if she wants it.
And so people are overbuying service. Shippers are over promising. And then they're held to it, and everybody's trying to compete with what Amazon's doing. So that's number one. Take a look at what you're sending out and what level of service you're buying, and that can solve some of the problem.
Right.
One of the big drivers of cost for your listeners is the cube a package takes up. So the carriers started to make a huge move a couple of years back now, to charge more and more for the cube a shipment takes up rather than the weight of a shipment. And so the current general rule out there in the marketplace is length times width times height divided by 139 gives you a cubic dimension. And you charge for either the weight of the shipment or the amount of cube based on that formula. And so more and more packages have been dimensionalizing. And it was an immediate overnight increase in the cost for shippers that many didn't know how to quantify it.
Right.
Because they weren't collecting the dimensions of packages. Now, carriers are even charging you a fee if you don't provide the dimensions when you transmit the shipment data to them. And a new fee, a new and improved fee. So if you don't send me the data on your shipment in advance, we're going to charge you a fee for that.
Yeah, negative reinforcement for sure. And I remember those dimensional rules used to be 194, then it was 166, and now you're saying it's 139.
130, right.
That's that is really interesting. So really trying to, so what you've said is mind the expectations of your customer to see really when do they want to get it, can help slow the service down.
Don't
overbuy. Don't overbuy,
Cool.
That's a great way to put it. Be mindful of the dimensions of your products. Is there anything else that you would suggest?
Be mindful of the cube and see what you can do to reduce the cube a package takes up. Yeah. So beyond that, all of the things that the shippers, the carriers are charging the shippers, delivery area surcharge, extended delivery area surcharges, additional handling fee, residential fees, all of those, and the dimensional rule itself, they're all negotiable.
Got it.
Everything is negotiable. They can give you a piece of paper and say, you know, here are your rules, or most often what I see in contracts that I review for shippers is whatever the rules that are in effect on the carrier's website on the day the shipment is tendered. That's what's the rule is. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the really smart shippers out there have a rule that says it's the rules that are in effect the day the contract is signed. And that takes away the ability of the carrier to just change it willy-nilly overnight, which we've seen over the last couple of years. Nothing prevents a carrier from changing a rule or a surcharge or even the definition of a zip code as to whether it's a delivery area surcharge or an extended delivery area surcharge. They can go in overnight and change a bunch of zip codes to extend it.
Interesting.
And you're going to pay more for that. And they don't have to notify you. They can do it without notice. So all of that is negotiable, and including the fees, whether the fee is even charged to you at all. You could have the dim rule waived.
Yeah.
You could have the fuel surcharge waived.
Interesting. Is there a whole cottage industry of companies that are coming out to say, listen, this is super complicated. My company can help audit. You know, before it was just, did it get delivered on time back when I was in the parcel side of the house. But now I'm sure there's companies out there saying, let us take this over, and for a gain share type of thing, we can help audit. Is that an emerging industry that you're seeing?
Right. It's not emerging. It's a very mature business now. There's two things you need to audit for. One is on-time delivery.
Yep.
And you can get your money back if the carrier has not given the shipment delivery based on the guarantee. The other thing is actually the application of your rate, because it is complex, the rate that is associated with the transaction. What is the correct charge? And so if you're not auditing for that,
sure,
a little tiny mistake, if you've got a lot of packages per day, can accumulate very fast. So I just had a recent example with a client who had one very, very small part of their business, and the carrier forgot to add one of the discounts in their contract to it. And over time, it grew to over $500,000.
Wow. How willing are the carriers to come back and give that money back? I would think that would be a difficult.
So they're not in a hurry to do that. Would
Sure.
you like to write a check back for $500,000 or $1 million or more? So they put rules in their tariff that says, well, if the shipment was longer than 6 months ago, we don't have to honor the claim. Or if it was longer than 9 months ago, we don't have to honor it. So they've limited their exposure on overcharges that shippers can't go back. But again, like everything else, that's negotiable, and there's ways to handle that with the carrier. But the first thing is you got to make sure you're auditing the bill for the right rate application.
Yeah.
And then the other cottage industry that has percolated up with people like yourself, actually, that had some experience in the parcel industry and have spun off and started their own companies to help shippers navigate their way through the complexities of negotiating a parcel contract. First, to build a model of the shipper's business. What does it look like based on the services they're using, the zones the shipments are going to, the weights of the transactions that are going out the door. Take a look at the cube that's going out, what dim rule might be reasonable. Does it have any impact at all? It may not have any impact at all on the shipper. And for other shippers, if you're shipping Easter baskets that take up a lot of space and don't weigh anything, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And so you need help. And then, so the third-party logistics companies that are out there have the benefit of reading multiple contracts.
Right.
Whereas a shipper on their own, they're not calling up their peers in the industry saying, can I read your carrier contract? That doesn't happen. But the consultants that are out there do, in fact, every day of the week, read the carrier contracts that are out there. They can see what's appropriate, what's being offered to peers of your size. They can see what kinds of concessions are being offered by the carriers to your peers. And they can offer suggestions and a script as to how to negotiate with the carriers. Yeah. Most of the third parties today don't actually negotiate with the carriers directly. They provide instruction, advice, counsel to the shippers on what they should be doing, what they should be asking for. And they have the tools to analyze the responses from the carriers, because the carriers' base rates don't match up.
Yeah.
The FedEx base rate is no longer the same as the UPS rate.
Yeah, it can be certainly.
You and I grew up in an environment where the base rates did match. They don't match anymore.
I know. Well, that's the complexity is what makes it a success. This is Jerry. It's been tremendous having you on the show, and the time always goes by much quicker. And I absolutely know that you'll be on the show again to talk in more detail, because we just really scratched the surface of it. But I think the key takeaway is, don't be afraid to negotiate, because there's a lot of things out there that can impact you on a high volume shipper. So anyway, I can't thank you enough for being with us today, and we absolutely will get you back on the show, because there's certainly some questions that I'd like to follow up on. So, and I want to thank all of you for listening and joining us today on the Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring supply chain logistics, the Storytellers, of course brought to you by Cap Logistics. Jerry, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, see ya.